Welcome to the Village Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Glenn. In this series of episodes, we'll deep dive into two key categories: nature connection and creating a healthy sense of community. As a listener, you will be brought to that place where nature and community come together. Specifically, we'll explore some key questions and strategies regarding the who, what, how, and why. You've probably heard the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." But what does it take to raise a village? Or better yet, what does it take to raise a nature-connected village? That's been one of my driving questions for the past 2 decades, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. I'm calling this episode, "Where's My Village?" because that's a question I've heard so many times over the years. It's often spoken when a person is feeling desperate, isolated, and overwhelmed. And yes, it's more often spoken by parents, and rightfully so. We've been participating in an experiment called the nuclear family for way too long, and many of us are starting to ask, is this even serving us? But what do we do instead? What other options do we have? I've noticed a growing desire for people to connect with others and to create a sense of community. This is different from an intentional community where people live and work together. A sense of community can occur when we arrive at a place of deeper connection with others. And to get there, it does take some effort, as we'll discuss here in this episode. Today's topic is creating a healthy sense of community, or you could call it people connection. So there's been a strong and growing nature connection movement out there over the past many years, decades. I know when I got into this work 25 years ago, we didn't even have the term nature connection. You know, it's grown that fast. Now you see that term or hear it in a lot of places, or at least I do. So this movement has really picked up and really grown just in the past 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. And that's really exciting. That's really awesome to see. I love that it's becoming part of our vocabulary, and there's so many schools and books being written and organizations that are taking this on, and asking these questions. How do we connect people to nature? Because I feel like that's part of being a human being, right? It's part of how do we live on this planet? How do we live on this earth? Some of those answers come through our connection to nature. So I think when we look at this growing nature connection movement, I think it's time for another movement. I think it's time for the next phase, which is a people connection movement. It seems to be the next step in the natural progression of connection. We connect to nature, and then we start connecting to people. Because community building is something inherent in us. We're social humans, we're social beings. And we want to connect with others. We want to create groups or clubs or a place where we feel like we can belong and there's like-minded people. And often for a lot of people who've started a nature connection organization or a club, you've probably found that at some point people are like, hey, I really want to be a part of this. And at first it's like, a part of what? You know, how do I help them be a part of this? We're just some small club or school. And that's good to recognize. It's good if that's happening. You know, it says people want to be a part of, really I think what they're saying is I want to be a part of a community. I feel like I have a place here and I want to be around like-minded people. So a lot of nature connection organizations start to build community because it just naturally starts to occur. And it's a wonderful place for that. It's a wonderful place for people connection to be happening. And it's not necessary. Maybe you don't want to go down that path, but maybe you do. And if you don't, maybe it's just because you need more tools, more strategies. Maybe it's something to explore, and the more you learn about it, the more you might realize, oh, you know what, I do like this. I do want this in my life. So as I said, I feel like it's time for that next phase in connection practices, or that next phase in the connection movement to occur. Because we're a society that's disconnected. And our culture is very good at keeping us that way. Just look at the growing numbers of depression, suicide, isolation, teen depression. We're terrible at peacemaking, and we're quite effective at disconnect. And we're quite effective at conflict avoidance. Things like that, like conflict avoidance, you'll hear me talk about it a little bit later. I get it. I used to be so conflict avoidant because I didn't have models of peacemaking. But I've learned over the years, and trying to gain strategies and leaning in towards conflict with others. And the more you do it, it's like working a muscle at the gym. The more you do it, the stronger it gets, the more confident you get in doing it. And you see that on the other side of conflict, when you're really able to do that with another human, it's beautiful. There's often tears of sadness, tears of joy, learning so much more about each other and what your needs and thoughts and feelings are. There's so much connection that can happen through going into our conflicts with another person, and then on the other side, it's like you're stronger together. You're more confident in your relationship. There's more trust. There's more connection. And that's such a beautiful thing. And I know my closest friends are friends who are not conflict avoidant. They're friends where we actually can go in and talk to each other and raise our concerns. And we know each other, and we know enough tools where we don't do it in a harsh way. We can enter that space in a real honest and gentle and beautiful way. It's not to say we're suppressing our anger or anything, but we know how to communicate that in a good way. So why am I talking about this? Because it does come up. It's part of the process of connecting with people, right? It's part of the process of community building and creating a healthy sense of community, as we'll get more into here. So it seems that when it comes to reversing the trend of disconnect and moving towards connection, that first step is nature connection. It's a good first step. If we're like, hey, we want to be more connected, let's go into nature connection. Why? Nature connection, it teaches us how to relate, how to empathize, to be present. We're going out there, if you take classes in it or you get mentoring and connecting to nature, often it includes sensory meditations or sensory exercises. So we're listening to the birds, we're smelling the air, we're feeling the earth on our feet. All of those things bring us into the present moment. And as we do that and we start noticing the birds and we notice the plants, we notice the animals, we start to grow in our connection to them, and we start to empathize even more. It's a great way to develop empathy for other creatures. Does that translate to people? Yes, it very well can. It helps us to learn how to relate to the world around us, and it helps us to figure out what's my place in this world. We're born onto this earth, and I know it can seem, we can be disillusioned by what is this planet that we're born into, because there's so much man-made stuff out there that it can seem that's what we're born into. We're also born into the natural world. We are nature. We are human beings. And we have a place in this natural world. And I do think that as we connect to nature and we connect our senses and we learn about our place, it teaches us about who we are individually and collectively. And I do feel like that's so needed in this world. So needed when it comes to the questions of how do we deal with climate change and all these problems going on in the world. I really think connection is going to be part of the solution, that it needs to be part of the solution, and that it is already giving us the solution if we tune into it and talk about it. So nature helps us also enter the right brain. It gets us out of our left brain, and it helps us enter our right brain, where we can have feelings of expansiveness and connection and awe. Left brain is more associated with past and future, and associated with categories and organization and lists and things like that. And we need it sometimes, but we've given it a little too much power and control in our lives. And right brain is going to be really important, I think, going into the future, because it is about the present moment, getting into the present moment. What is happening right here, right now? Who am I? What can I be doing? Or how can I just be? And I think we need to draw on that as a resource to help us answer difficult questions or exciting questions and hopeful questions. I think it'll give us hope. I know it does. And I'm not just saying from my own experience, but experiences of others, many, many others, that it gives us a sense of hope and connection, and it also helps wipe away a lot of the fears and anxieties. Those kind of quiet a bit when we enter the natural environment with some mentoring and some connection practices. I know when I got into it, I got into it because I wanted to learn survival skills, and I wanted to learn what's around me. What are these trees? What are these plants? How can they help me? And it grew from there into a deep connection because I started spending so much time out in the woods and wandering and sleeping out under the stars, just on a simple sleeping bag on the ground. And I started having so many cool experiences, and I wanted to share it with others. And that's what really made me want to teach and mentor other people and build community, because I was like, wow, nature is awesome, you guys. Like, there's so many cool things about this planet, and most people aren't seeing it, or at least back then. And so I wanted to build community, and that's kind of where I got started on this path, and maybe for some of you that rings true to you too. I think of this also as like being a whole human being. What does that mean to be whole or authentic or connected? And we can think about it, and we also have people who've lived very connected to the earth for a long time, for generations, who have taught us as well that yes, connection means connection to nature, connection to others, and connection to self. And there's a fourth one there that we'll get into another time. Once we have that connection to nature, from there, step 2 is either connection to self or connection to others. And these two can happen simultaneously, and often do, because as we explore one of them, it brings up the harmful patterns of the other, right? So if we want to dive into connection to self, what does that mean? Who am I? Why do I do what I do? What do I want? What's coming through me? What do I have to offer? What are my gifts? As we explore that, we might also start noticing some patterns from the past of like, wow, why do I do this thing? Why do I react that way? Oh, it's because of some past event or moment or series of events. And then it starts to stir up our past pain and trauma with disconnect from other people, whether it's our family or friends or peer groups at school or bullying and things like that. And then we start looking at people connection and, gosh, how do I not repeat those patterns? And what kind of person am I to other people? And how can we learn to relate in a healthier way with each other? And we might see that some of our patterns today are protective, have come out of a place of something in the past happened and we protected ourselves. So it's important to give ourselves some grace with all of this, and forgiveness, and lots of love and care, that we were doing the best we could and we protected ourselves. And sometimes now that we're adults, we can look at this protection and realize, oh my gosh, that protection is cutting me off from myself and cutting me off from others. And maybe it's time I lean into that a little bit. Maybe it's time I look at that a little bit. The cool thing is there's a lot of people today. The hopeful thing is there's so many wonderful teachers out there now, writing books, speaking about this, teaching people about how do we heal ourselves, how do we connect to ourselves. And there's a lot of great tools out there for connecting with people as well. But I think the people connection, I don't know, maybe you've seen it, but I haven't seen it really put together I think it's still kind of forming and coming together like Nature Connection has. I have a lot of hope in this area that there is a lot of tools, strategies, processes that we can use today to help us connect deeper to ourselves, connect deeper to other people. At the same time, there is a bit of a warning because maybe you've seen this as well. There's so much self-help and coaching, the world of personal coaching. There are some beautiful, wonderful people out there doing it, and there's a lot of coaching that has been taken over by capitalism, really, just trying to make money. And there's a lot of coaching programs that, make big promises where I'm just like, wow, there's no way they can keep that promise. Like, it's just not possible. And they make huge promises, and then they can charge a lot of money, and you go do it, and you come home, and then sometimes people are hard on themselves because they're like, well, they told me that this would happen, and it's not. Well, that's not your fault. They just made a big promise. So you just have to, kind of be weary and ask around, and don't just fall for like a cool marketing gimmick when it comes to that world. There are a lot of beautiful, wonderful people doing great things in that realm as well. So as I said, connection with others is inherent in us as human beings, right? When we're born into this world, we are helpless. We need the love and care of an older human being. Ideally, it's parents, but it's not always. And this is where our attachment needs begin. We need to be loved. We need to matter to somebody. We need to have people who have our backs. And we need to be safe. These are all attachment needs. And it comes out of our early years, and I know attachment needs are one of those things where not that long ago, people would be like, oh, this person's too attached. It was seen as a bad thing, like attachment is bad. But we've learned that attachment is human. Attachment is not avoidable. It's inherent in us. It's part of us. You can't not be attached. We have different forms of attachment. We might be avoidant, where we want to cut and run or avoid anything and escape. But, there's healthy attachment. So what is community? What is community building, and how do we create a healthy sense of community? I think those are all great questions. I'll dig into this a little bit here, but let it be a journey for you. Let it be a quest for you, because I won't be able to answer all of your questions, and I don't know that any one person can, but it can be a quest. Write down your questions, write down your insights, make some journals about it, talk to different people about this. But yeah, we'll dig into this a little bit. So what is community building? I see it at my wilderness school, forest school. We noticed that people wanted to start coming together. They're like, hey, I want to be a part of this. I like this group of people. I want to be around everyone more. And everyone was feeling that. So we started hosting potlucks. I think it kind of started there. Let's host a potluck where everyone shows up, bring some food to share. We'd have a circle where we'd circle up before the meal, which was different. I remember, like, most potlucks back then was like people would just show up at any time. Like if it was from, 4 to 8 p.m., people would show up any time. They'd just come and go as they pleased, and food would be laying out all over the place, and they'd just eat whenever and whatever. And, if you got there late, there probably wouldn't be much left. And we started doing it differently. We're like, we're going to gather up. We're not going to eat until after we do a meal circle. So we started facilitating a little bit of connective practices, really is another word. And we were like, we're going to set all the food out, but we're not going to eat yet. We're going to eat at 6. We're going to start a circle at 6 p.m. So if you show up early, we're just hanging out. You might snack a little if people are hungry. And then at 6 p.m., we'd call everyone together, have a big circle. We'd share some gratitude. We might sing a song or do a rhythm game or some other fun activity, something fun to loosen people up. Along with the gratitude, we might ask people to share something else about themselves. We might ask people to share what they brought, the food-wise, or any food allergies. And then myself or someone just kind of speak to the gathering and what's our purpose here, and grateful that they all made it. And, we really appreciate all of you, and we're glad that you're here. We want to connect with you more. We want to get to know you more. We see you as our community and our supporters. And so we want to do this with you and for you. Something to that effect, where you're speaking to the purpose behind this gathering, and just something simple like that. Then we would eat. Yeah, then we'd have time to eat, and then we might play games and hang out and talk afterwards. And oftentimes these were outside. Unless it was winter time, we might be indoors. But if the weather was nice, we were outside in nature. But just having that little bit of like that circle, that facilitated time, changed a lot. It really showed people like, oh, this is different. There's something going on here, and I'm not sure quite what it is, but I like it. And there's just that feeling of that, like something more. It's beyond just hanging out with people. And that really made an impact, and we started doing that regularly, and all these people would come together, and it felt like this really awesome sense of community. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to build a sense of community? And again, this example is just one example, one way to do it. Potlucks are simple. It's not expensive to put on or anything. You might supply a few items, but it's a pretty simple way to build community. So why would you want that? There's a lot of benefits. Again, I think it's inherent in us. It also, if you have an organization, it really helps bring in more stakeholders. People really want to support you. Sometimes they'll bring friends who've never experienced you or your organization, and they'll want to support it now. They're like, oh my gosh, I want to send my kids to this program. I want to be a part of this thing. So, a nature school, a wilderness organization is a great place to build that. Now, once you start down this journey of creating community, connecting to other people, and this could be within friend circles even, you might not even think of it as like we're creating community. It might just be a group of peers. There's going to be different stages that you're likely to enter. And when you don't know these stages, it can be surprising, confusing, conflicting as you progress through these. So I didn't know these stages when I first was doing this a number of years ago. And these stages are not that unlike the same stages that you go through in a romantic relationship. In a romantic relationship, there's 4 or 5 stages, 6 stages. Same with community. Now there's a lot of different models of it, but they're all pretty similar. So you can Google about this and find a lot of different. They're going to vary slightly, but there's kind of a theme to it. And that theme is in stage 1 of relationship building, community building, entering a romantic relationship. That stage 1 is sometimes referred to as the romance stage in intimate relationships. And in community building, it's very similar. It's a stage where everyone's getting to know each other. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of passion and interest, and it's fun and it's connective. But there's also, it's often more surface. Like you might be going kind of deep, getting to know each other, but sometimes it's not fully expressive. Like there might be people who have issues, but they're scared to voice it because they're not sure how it's going to be handled, and that brings you into the next stage, which is the power struggle or conflict stage. So in this stage, this is where people start getting real in a sense. Not that they weren't real before. I shouldn't say it like that. It's more, this is where our needs start to surface in an honest way. we start expressing the things that are bothering us. And if we don't have practice in peacemaking, this can come out in ways that are hard to repair, right? So we've probably all seen this, Sometimes also if we've bottled up something for a long time, as we say, it can come out sideways. Meaning if we're in the practice of holding a lot in and not expressing concerns and needs and, conflicts, then it can come out with the wrong people, right? So this group of people feels safe to me. So that's part of stage 1 is developing a sense of safety. Well, once you have that safety, sometimes things come out sideways where it seems like they're angry at this person and you're not sure, why are they angry at this? This seems like a small thing. And then you dig in and you find out, oh, they're actually angry at this other thing. They've just been holding in all that anger. And so you hit this power struggle, this conflict zone, where all this is coming up. People are getting a little more like safe. They feel safe enough to really share what's going on. And if the group doesn't have the tools, strategies, the processes, the empathy, the listening skills, then it can really implode. It can really implode. And this takes out a lot of families and friend groups and communities and organizations. That's why this stage has been a big interest of mine for many years. I've been taking deep dives into this. What does peacemaking look like when things are really tough, when there's two people just like yelling at each other? What do we do? How can we step into that? How can we do some peacemaking and some resolution here? And, I'm here to say, yes, that is scary, and it's possible to peacemake in these situations. I grew up in my childhood. I didn't have a lot of models for how to deal with that. If we got into an argument, we would just go our own separate ways, hide out in our room until we calmed down enough, and then we'd come back together and oftentimes pretend like nothing happened. So time does not heal all wounds, right? Conflict avoidance does not heal wounds. So if you're conflict avoidant, I understand. I used to be that way for a long time. And it's hard to lean into conflict. It's hard to learn these tools and apply them as needed. That's why you want to learn them before they're needed, so that you can perfect them and talk to people about them and be like, hey, let's use these tools when we get there. If we get there, then we have something to fall back on, right? That's the better way to approach this. Have those there that you can fall back on. And know that conflict avoidance is trust avoidance, or it diminishes trust. Because when there is a conflict, that is such an opportunity to learn and grow about each other, and grow into a new, deeper, more caring, more loving part of your relationship or relationships with a group of people even. And if we avoid that, when there is conflict and we don't want to go in there and we don't want to talk about it, it's going to diminish trust. Trust requires us to go into those spaces together and to work through things together. So in this second phase of the power struggle, the conflict zone, this is where we use those tools and processes and strategies and our empathy and our listening. And we throw out things like defensiveness and running away, and we try to sit with it, and we pull in our support system if needed or as needed, and we bring in our tools. And then once we've entered that, we can enter the third stage, which is deciding and committing. First, deciding, do I want to stay in connection with these people? Do I want connection with them? Sometimes we learn that, wow, the way this person handled this whole situation is a real red flag for me, and I need to get out of this. I need to get away from this person or these people. And that's the decision time. we might also see like, okay, the way they handled this whole situation is a green flag. Like, yeah, it was tough. It was scary. I wanted to run. And we fell back on these tools and our strategies and our network. And gosh, this is something where I want to be connected with these people. This really brought in a deeper level of trust now. And then you commit. You commit to, hey, you know what? In the future, this is how I'm going to handle things with you. You make new agreements, and then you can move forward with beautiful growth and deeper connection, deeper friendship. And the more you do this, like, just know these stages are going to come up more than once, right? The more you do it, it becomes easier. It becomes stronger. That connection, that bond becomes stronger, and you're more confident that you can get through these things. And I think it's important to know this because, again, when we don't know that there's these stages, a lot of people think the romance stage, that first stage, is what it's all about. And you see that in romantic relationships a lot. There are people who are addicted to stage 1, and as soon as it starts to hit stage 2, they're gone. They're out of there, and they're on to the next relationship. Because it feels good. It's amazing. It's awesome. But you know what? You can enter stage 1 again after you've gone through stage 2 and 3. You can get back to that feeling of stage 1 often. It'll be different, but it can still be wonderful. So these stages are not unlike, if you've heard of the forming, norming, storming, performing stages. They're similar to that. Forming is like you're forming how you're going to be together, forming the group. And then at some point you're normalizing how you are around each other, creating that safety. And then there's the storming. And then there's the performing. On the other end, on the other side of that storming phase is the performing, where you're really gelling together and you're really able to accomplish things together. If that's your goal, or you're able to, provide for support for each other. Once you've gone through that, maybe that's your performing stage, is supporting and loving and caring about each other. It might not be an organizational goal. It doesn't have to be that. It's a healing journey. If it's not, then maybe people aren't being real with each other. If you're not hitting that conflict zone, maybe people are holding back and aren't feeling safe enough to share. We have to create that space for people to share and space for people to feel safe, and know that even if we do that, create that space, some people will still not feel safe sharing. And that's not necessarily on you or the group. Maybe that's just their thing. I've seen that before too, where it's just like, no matter what kind of space we create, how safe we make it, some people are just like, I just can't. I just cannot open up. I can't go into this with anyone, maybe, or at least this group. But on the other side of it is this beautiful journey of connecting with people and building community relations. Now, I do want to share some things that can help you in this conflict stage, right? I know I'm spending a lot of time in it, but that's because I feel like there hasn't been a lot of attention on it, perhaps. Maybe, I don't know who's listening to this exactly, so maybe you're fully aware of all of this, and that is awesome and wonderful, and know that that is a gift, and you're probably a valuable person in your community already. But I do want to share some things that can help in that conflict zone, because it can be such a hindrance to community building, right? And really it's like that's the big hurdle, like that's the mountain that we have to climb. So that's why I'm spending this time on it. The fun stuff is easier, like hanging out, having fun, doing potlucks, playing games, going on adventures, sitting and sharing, telling stories, holding storytelling evenings where people can share their adventure stories and things. Like, that's all the fun, easy part. And maybe I'll have podcasts later that will talk more about those kinds of things. But in this, here's some tools that can help in that conflict zone. So one, just know that the power struggle or conflict stage is a part of the journey, that it's normal, and it will visit you more than once. It's not just a one and done. Like it's going to visit more than once, and that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean it's all over, all hope is lost, that you should cut and run. You can see it as an opportunity, right? Number 2, learn to identify it, learn to see it coming, right? So you don't get caught off guard or blindsided by the power struggle. Learn to see that coming so that you can start preparing for it, right? So that you can, hey guys, anyone else seeing this? Like, I think we need to hold a certain session. Maybe you start using your tools right then. We need to create a certain space so that we can mitigate the fallout of this. 3, educate yourself on strategies and processes. Do this when things are going well, not when you're in the thick of it, and everyone's feeling upbeat and positive. Just like bring out these processes. Like, hey, everyone, you're all really important to me. I really care about you. I really love you. And I want to stay connected with you. And I want to grow with you. So here's some processes that I've learned that can really help us when and if we hit certain conflicts up ahead. Community is about anticipating what could go wrong and making agreements around that. Agreements are a big part of community, right? How are we going to handle things when things come up? And sometimes writing it all down, because it seems like, this is wonderful, we're going to remember this forever. And then 6 months later, people have completely different views on what you all agreed to 6 months prior. So it's like, oops, guess we should have written it down so that we're all very clear on what our agreements are. But yeah, educate yourself, learn about, I would say that should include learning about attachment needs. That comes up big time. I work with kids a lot. That comes up with children. It's great for parents to know. It comes up with other adults. It comes up in my personal relationship, in my marriage. I'll share with you real quick shortcut attachment needs. There's 4 key attachment needs where if you're having a conflict, most likely someone is feeling a lack in one of these, that one of these is feeling violated. The 4 are, number 1, do you love me and accept me unconditionally? Number 2, do I matter to you? Number 3, do you have my back? And number 4, am I safe with you, physically, emotionally, sexually, right? So maybe I'm upset about the dishes aren't getting done. Something as simple as that. Well, I might be thinking like, gosh, do you even have my back? Like, you said you would do this and the dishes aren't done yet. It feels like you don't have my back. I do all this other work and you had one thing to do and you didn't do it. So that's how that can show up. I see it with kids all the time. Like, they want to know that their teachers have their back, that they're safe to be themselves, that somebody cares about them and accepts them unconditionally, right? These are all universal needs. A couple other categories of things that would be good to research here and look into. We might have podcasts on these later. One is look into guess culture, ask culture, and tell culture. So you can Google that and read up on that. Very good to know, because a lot of conflicts can arise out of those. And if you don't know them, it can really be kind of catching people off guard and like, whoa, what's going on here? Also, learning more about boundary setting. This is a growing thing, so a lot of you might already be very familiar with this, but being able to say no and set clear boundaries, clear is the key. And then accountability, practicing accountability, which means owning your part in things. So when someone's like, hey, this happened, or you did this, or you said this, and it really bothered me, not denying it, not getting defensive, but just owning that. Like, wow, thank you for telling me that. I can see that, how that would hurt you, and I'm really sorry for that. So taking accountability is huge. And then lastly here on these tips of what to do in this conflict power struggle is when the going gets tough, fall back on your tools. Use them. And I know some people it's been an interesting thing when I talk to people about this. I'm like, hey, you guys, there's tools for this. And they're like, no, tools don't work. I'm like, okay, there's strategies. And they're like, no, not strategies. And I'll say, all right, well, we have these processes. And they're like, oh yeah, processes are good. I like processes. And I'm like, it's all just semantics, like, but I've learned that some people are really turned off by some of these terms. Like some people hate the word tools. Some people hate the word process. Some people hate the word strategy. To me, it's all just one and the same. I'm talking about skills even. Sometimes I call them skills. Whatever you want to call it, whatever works for you, just know if someone else uses one of these words, we're probably all talking about the same thing. But yeah, use what you have, use what you've learned. And that can be the hardest thing. It's really difficult sometimes to do that. That's why it's good to have it written down or in a worksheet, something like that, right? So it seems obvious, but it doesn't always happen this way. And it kind of is like that comedic bit a while back. There's some stand-up comedian who was like, talking about a guy who learns karate for 20 years, practices, he's got perfect technique and all these techniques are flawless and precise. And then they get in a fight, and what happens? All those techniques go out the window, and they just like flail their hands in the air and scream. They're just like, ah. If you don't practice when you have the adrenaline up, then it kind of goes out the window. Like that's when you really need these tools. So it's when we are emotionally flooded, that's when we really need this stuff. And yes, that can be the hardest time to go to them. So it's important if we are emotionally flooded to give ourselves or others time to come down on their scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the highest. It's a good thing to ask, like, hey, where are you on your scale? And give time, and hopefully people have their tools that help them come down on their scale and get below a 5, and then come and sit down together and have a resolving or peacemaking conversation or process. Sometimes if people are really high on their scale, it's like, well, now's not the time. We need to give space here, walk it off, breathe, long exhales, do something to come down on that scale, and then we can talk. And one other strategy before we go, I'm going to be wrapping this up soon. I don't want this to be too heavy for people. I know you're here because you're excited about community building, like, yay, community building. And then I'm talking about all this like conflict stuff, and it's like, oh, I don't like conflict. So thanks for sticking with me. One other strategy that works super well with all relationships, kids, parents, coworkers, is the Gottmans call it the love account or relational account. And that just means we want to be paying attention to our little interactions throughout the day. Think of every interaction as an opportunity to make a deposit or a withdrawal from your account with that person. And saying something positive, maybe a pat on the shoulder or a high five or a hug, those are all positive things. Or doing an act of service, that's a positive thing. Learn what it is that fills the account of the people around you, and share what fills yours or what depletes yours. This is a great conversation to have with your people. Hey, what kinds of things fill your account? What kind of things deplete it? Also know that neutral also can be depleting, and neutral categories are interactions where it's about scheduling or tasks, like, hey, did you take out the trash, or who's picking up the kids? A lot of parents get caught up in that day-to-day stuff, and those are neutral, which is depleting of the relational or love account. And they say to be in good relations with someone, our ideal ratio is 1 to 5, or at least minimum is 1 to 5. That's 1 negative to 5 positives. So for every negative or neutral interaction, we want to have 5, follow that up with 5 positive interactions, right? And the ideal is 1 to 20. So for every negative or neutral, we have 20 positive interactions. And if it gets below 1 to 5, then there's going to be some conflict, there's going to be some struggles. And in a marriage or intimate relationship, if you're hanging out there for a long time below 1 to 5 ratio, it's a good predictor of divorce, or separation. Right? People are just not going to last long, and they're not going to be happy. They might last a while because they're doing it for other reasons or sticking together for other reasons, but they're not going to be happy, right? Same thing when it comes to community building, relationships. It's all relationship building. Apply this. It's a great day-to-day strategy, the love account or relational account, and it's just paying attention to all those little interactions that we have. And again, it can be verbal, it can be physical, it can be acts of service. Talk to people about it. It can be a really fun conversation, actually. Like a lot of times people are like, oh, wow, I'm glad you're asking me this. Like, this is fun to talk about because it tells the other person that you care about them, that you want to be show up better for them. The title of this episode is, Where's My Village? If you've been asking that question, know that you're not alone. Village creating is about connection, first and foremost. It's a journey of coming out of your shell, a journey of being seen and heard, a journey of healing, and it's about leaving something better for the future generations than what we've had.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this. And if this is stirring something in you and you feel like you could use some extra help, some support, or you'd like to learn more of these strategies, tools, processes that I've referred to in this recording, I'm totally here for you. Feel free to reach out. We could all use some support, especially if we are in that conflict or power struggle stage. Thanks for listening.
Time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. What a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. What a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in